criteria. And the effort was being made to define the criteria as quantifiable and verifiable and clear as possible, but still there still needs work to be done. The criteria are meant to be defined so as to avoid any de facto discrimination between third countries and the European Union. Therefore, the same criteria apply for the European Union as well as for third countries. It's therefore WTO compatible. It's not supposed to be a ban. Biofuels not fulfilling the criteria can still be marked in the European Union. And also one has to underline that the 10% target in general will boost the biofuel consumption, and therefore a substantial part will have to come also from third countries. Now to the basic operation. As I was saying, the sustainability scheme consists of, is a mandatory scheme. It therefore, is my time over? Okay. It therefore consists, oh my God, it therefore consists of mandatory sustainability criteria and also monitoring requirements by the European Commission. The sustainability criteria have to be met in order to count the biofuels towards the 10% target, count towards renewable energy obligations placed on fuel suppliers, and also financial support for consumption. How shall this verification now be met? The Commission, and this is the link to further presentations coming up, can conclude bilateral, multilateral agreements and also accredit voluntary national, multinational, and international schemes as sufficient proof, and then member states have to accept this as evidence. I don't want to go into detail into the criteria. I suppose you will have the presentations later. What I wanted to show here is what the criteria are. You have a greenhouse gas threshold to be achieved, which is 35% from the threshold. You have two criteria which are linked to land use, which are linked to land areas. On the one hand, one on the importance of high carbon stock, another one on high biodiversity value. You have further criteria, but I'm happy to explain more in detail in the discussion on other environmental and social impacts, which is a reporting requirement. You have here social sustainability criteria. What is meant here in red is for those who having followed the discussions in the European Union. In red you have always what came into the discussion during negotiations in Council and Parliament, and which was in addition to the European Commission scheme or the proposal. We are planning on the way forward. We are planning to come up with a guideline on the practical implementation of the scheme. For the enforcement of the sustainability criteria, and what I was saying and what I wanted to underline here is that the Commission can conclude bilateral, multilateral agreements and also can recognize voluntary industry-based schemes. And this, herefore I prepared a specific slide where I think it's still important to flag that up. The Commission is very positive about the development of voluntary certification schemes. It would need to be checked whether the criteria are in line with the Renewable Energy Directive and whether the verification procedure is in line. The Commission does not have a specific view or is okay with schemes either going beyond the scope or just fulfilling the criteria. And we hope to be ready with the recognition of schemes in autumn. Here, just to show you that the process is not over, the Commission has quite overwhelming tasks to fulfill in the upcoming years for the smooth implementation of the scheme. In 2009, further definition of especially the land use related criteria. In 2010, a report on indirect land use change, and it goes on and on and on until 2014. What will be the next steps? Here we have already almost fulfilled everything. What is important here is that after we had the final agreement in Council and Parliament, there will be the publication in the official journal on the 5th of June, which I think is Friday. And what will happen then? Then 18 months, member states transposition time. Afterwards, as I was saying, the guidance to be worked out by the European Commission on how to implement the scheme and other elements which I outlined before on the implementation of the scheme. Conclusions, yeah, I felt the need to come up with some conclusions on certification, and this is really very much my final slide. If we talk about certification, I think we always have to stay in proportion, that we can't solve all the problems we are facing in this world. We can just tackle those problems we can actually tackle with certification. It's important that the criteria are effective, that they are non-discriminatory, that they actually work in practice. We need to work towards global sustainability standards. We can't stop at the European Union level. We can't stop with biofuels, but it has to be for agriculture production in general. And I suppose we all have to work together to show that we actually can make this scheme work, that we can implement that scheme, and in order to go forward. Therefore, thank you very much for your attention. Sorry for the time delay, and I'm happy to answer questions.
The audience will have plenty of questions during the Q&A session. The two first speakers address legal requirements for sustainability, but definitely there are other initiatives also, and voluntary certification is one of them. Our next speaker is Daudi Lelijveld. He's currently the chairman of the Belgian Sugarcane Initiatives, a voluntary standard that is being developed especially for sugarcane. This is an international scheme addressing both sugar and ethanol, and sugarcane, obviously. It promotes base management practices. And Daudi has been working for Cargill for the last 16 years, but he's here like the chairman of BSI and not as Cargill. So please, Daudi, the floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or good morning actually, still. I am going to read my presentation because otherwise I would do what Nick did and run over time because I tend to waffle. So for those of you who would like to see my eyes rather than my forehead, it will have to be during the question session rather than while I'm reading this presentation to you. The other thing I'd like to warn you about is that I'm going to be asking you to do some multitasking. So I'm glad to see so many ladies in the room because you're much better qualified at this than the gentlemen, I'm told. Because the slides and what I'm saying will be additional information. So I won't necessarily be speaking to the slides. This is how I crammed 30 minutes into 17. Okay, with no further ado. Firstly, I would like to thank UNICA for the opportunity to speak at this distinguished audience and hopefully leave you with a somewhat greater knowledge of whom, why, and what BSI is. And in the process, answering the question at hand, certification, how do we get there? The reality is that the production of biofuels, and probably more importantly, the importation into Europe at a time when greenhouse gas emissions are under the spotlight, has led to various initiatives looking at the sustainability in this and many other complexes such as palm oil. The sugar industry is well placed as an agro-industrial business. Sugarcane is a particularly effective crop in terms of its photosynthetic capacity to produce biomass. It contains a fibrous structure which provides a renewable fuel resource, and processing of the cane does not involve the use of any toxic or hazardous products or waste streams. Sugarcane produces more biomass, dry matter, per hectare than any other crop species. It can therefore have a strong positive influence on the environment and so has a great future in providing food. What would you like me to do? Thank you. Is that better? Sure? Thank you. Can I have that time back, please? As I was saying, sugarcane produces more biomass, and it can therefore have a strong positive influence on the environment, and so has a great future in providing food and or energy in a sustainable way. The Better Sugarcane Initiative is a collaboration of sugar ethanol retailers, investors, traders, producers, and NGOs who are committed to a sustainable sugar production by establishing principles and criteria that can be applied in the sugarcane growing regions of the world. The BSI website explains this activity in more detail, and I have no intention of trying to fill that information at this point. The BSI aims to reduce the impact of cane sugar production on the environment in measurable, and measurable is the operative word, as we shall see later. So in measurable ways, while also contributing to social and economic benefits for sugarcane farmers and all others concerned with the sugar and ethanol supply chains. There is increasingly wide acceptance of the fact that all agricultural and industrial enterprises need to operate in a manner where not just the economics, but also the social and environmental factors are promoted. Energy use, production efficiency, elimination of waste, a range of social and socio issues, and the effect on global climate change are all being more carefully monitored. In other words, there is a growing political and corporate move to address sustainable development. Some of these companies and organizations are already members of BSI, and we hope that all stakeholders, many of you in the room today, will eventually join. For those of you who are wondering why some are in small letters and others in big letters, is because those in small letters have not provided BSI with their official artwork yet. There's no other reason. Companies are beginning to appreciate that there are sound business reasons to adopt more sustainable production and processing practices. Managing social and environmental risks is important for growers, processors, traders, and food companies due to regulatory pressures, as well as shareholders and consumer expectations. Increasingly, environmental and social performance is also affecting access to markets and to capital. The pressure for a system to certify that sustainable practices are being adhered to has come largely from the marketplace, driven by anticipated regulation for ethanol in the EU and for sugar by a number of large industrial consumers who want to be able to certify that sugar and other ingredients in their products are produced by means of sustainable practices. However, it is not only the consumers that are the drivers for measuring sustainability. Society at large realizes the responsibility it has to the greater welfare of the planet. Many people and organizations see sustainable development and the urgent need to move to low-carbon economy as the most significant issue facing society today. I have excluded bankers and British members of Parliament from the definition of society. I'm told by the media that they have more pressing issues at this moment in time. There are other issues over and above greenhouse gas emissions, such as sustainable agricultural practices, protecting biodiversity and ecosystems, labor practices. But one thing is clear: the emphasis on sustainability is growing rapidly, and sugarcane industry needs to be involved. BSI members also believe that improving business and technical efficiencies inevitably benefits people and the environment, and as a result felt that these need to be an integral part of the sustainability exercise. The sugar industry has actually made significant progress over the decade in the field of being more sustainable, especially here in Brazil, and there is now a need for the sugar industry to be able to show this publicly and, more important, measurably, which requires a system that, as simply as possible, certifies alignment to sustainable practices. Sustainability. What is it? In general terms,